Hello, everyone. This is Verlita Odom, host of Verlita's Everything in Between podcast. Thank you for joining me today. It's been a while since we were last together. Today, I will be talking about my time as an investigator and a conservatorship worker for the Texas Department of Family and Protective Services, better known as Child Protective Services. I hope you find today's episode informative, and remember, you can always email questions for me. You can also leave a voicemail here on Anchor. And if you know me personally, you can always message me, inbox me any questions or concerns, and I will be sure to address those questions and answer them to the best of my ability on my next podcast. Thank you. Hope all is well. As an investigator, you're basically charged with going out and doing the investigation on the calls that are received. The calls are calls that come through our centralized intake, which the phone number, the toll-free number is 1-800-252-5400. And so anyone who suspects abuse or neglect of a child is legally obligated to report that. Whether you know that for sure, that's really not your responsibility. That's why you have investigators who will investigate the case or investigate the concerns. But if you call that number, it will obviously be put into a database, and the call will be staffed with a supervisor right there to determine whether or not it is worthy of being assigned out to a local office. Because not every call obviously is one that is abuse or neglect. So there are times when calls come in, and if they don't meet the standard or needing to be assigned out for further investigation, the call can literally be closed right there as centralized intake and never be assigned to a local office. However, for those calls that come in and there needs to be more investigating of that call or the allegations, it will then go from obviously a centralized intake location, and it'll be assigned out to a local office. That case will go to a supervisor into their workflow, and then the supervisor will assign that out to an investigator to go out and make contact with the child and the parent or guardian. So, that's what I did as an investigator. If I had a call that came through, or a case that was assigned to me, depending on the priority that was assigned, which was priority 1 or priority 2, that would tell me how much time I had to go out and make contact, or at least make attempt contact with a primary on the case. So if I got a priority 1, I needed to go out and I needed to make contact with someone in the case, either the child or the parent, within 24 hours. Most of the time you're going to be able to get that contact, that call, that face-to-face within the 24 hours. But every now and then you don't, for whatever reason. Maybe they've gone out of town and you can't get them on the phone or anything. So you just have to make sure you document your attempts to contact the child or the family. During the school year, of course, you're usually going to get, if the child is school age, you're usually going to make contact with them at the school. That is the usually the guaranteed way to see the child face to face is at a school. Everything is confidential. You may just because you're going to the school. Obviously, the local school staff is probably going to recognize you at some point that you work for Child Protective Services, but they are not. They do not get the details of why you're there, or anything like that. So that is kept confidential. So again, you'll usually make contact with the child during the school year if they're school age at the school, and then follow up by talking with the parent. Sometimes, you end up with talking to the parent first and then the child, but it's usually best to kind of try to get the child and talk with them and interview them first. Um, Depending on the allegations that have been made, it could be anything from emotional abuse, medical neglect, physical abuse, sexual abuse. Depending on the allegations, sometimes you actually end up having to refer that case to a forensic interviewer, because the case, could likely go to court, and you want to be able to have someone who has been specially trained to ask questions that are not leading to the child or suggestive to the child. You want someone who's been trained to do that. So we usually do that in the case of a child who is believed to have been sexually abused. Once you've made all of the contacts that are necessary to thoroughly investigate the case, which includes talking to the the children, guardians. Obviously, you're going to need to speak with the alleged perpetrator of the abuse or neglect. You're going to talk to any what we call collateral contacts, and collaterals are people who um, have additional information or possibly have additional information about the children, the family, the allegations that have been made. A collateral can be anyone; it could be a friend, a family, a coworker, and the family is able to give their own contacts or their own collaterals if they want to, or if they have any. And then, of course, the investigator is always free to contact anyone else they deem necessary in order to have a thorough investigation.
If you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. Let me explain. First, it's free. Second, there's creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. That's pretty awesome. Anchor will distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many other forums. You can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. And it's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. So download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started.
A call and a case is investigated, it can be closed out as, reason to believe that this abuse or neglect occurred. It could be ruled out that it did not occur, or it could be left unable to determine. And being an investigator is a very stressful job, as you might imagine. Working with any individual who you believe might be the victim of abuse or neglect, it can be very, very difficult. And during my time, I was fortunate not to ever have a case where I had to do a removal of a child from their parent. But of course, I had many coworkers who found it necessary for the safety and protection of the child to remove them from that parent's home. Anytime there is a removal, obviously it's not just made off the cuff. That investigator is calling their supervisor, is in close contact with their supervisor, staffing, letting them know what they are seeing and hearing while they're there. That supervisor at times also has to go up the chain of command to her supervisor or his supervisor to let them know that a removal is going to occur, because so many things have to start working when there's a removal that's going to take place. So, if I go out to a home and I walk onto the scene and there's literally a child being beaten, then obviously I'm going to be calling the police to come out and assist. And then, of course, during that time, there's, more than likely going to be a removal, and it's not just a removal of one child who's the victim. It will be the removal of any child that is in the home, and so they will be removed. Go with that worker, and from that time on, there's always going to be a plan put in place for reunification. So anytime you hear that there's been a child removed, it is not a permanent, that's it, case closed. The state is always interested in keeping the child with the family when that is possible, when the child can be safe. So there's always going to be a plan that's going to be put in place once a child is removed. CPS is going to put a plan in place. Normally it's about 12 months. And the family can be reunified long before that 12 months, but it usually is about a year. That's usually the set plan in the beginning is a year. And so the state will give the parent different things to do in order to reunify their family, so that they may have to go through parenting classes. They may, if there's domestic violence in the home, there may be therapy that's ordered for mother and father or husband and wife. There is the CPS workers, or different CPS workers. For instance, a family-based safety services worker will work with them one-on-one to do things such as, teaching them how to make a bottle with formula, the different ratio of water to formula. I mean, it's just that, it can be just that basic, but some people do not have an understanding of just those basic things. So the FBSS worker can work with them, and will work with them one-on-one in the home to help them master some things. And of course, you will have court dates where the parent is there, the FBSS worker is there, the conservatorship worker, the investigator, whoever is involved in the case. It is, could be called to testify, to give a report of how the child is doing in placement, and also how the parents are doing as far as their assigned, tasks to be completed in order to help reunify the family. A judge can grant an extension of another 6 months to make it a total of 18 months before a child is reunified. But again, that is usually only when the parents do not meet the guideline or the rules that are the plan that has been laid out for them, and have not completed certain things within time frame. In a case where drugs are involved, obviously you're going to want them to complete some type of substance abuse complete program or treatment. So there's just a lot of things that could, depending on what the problem was in the family, their plan will be catered, customized to, and tailored to them and their specific needs. So that, I know that's a lot, but when you're dealing with cases like this and dealing with jobs like, Child Protective Services, there is a lot involved. And that is one of the reasons why there's such a high turnover rate with the workers, because there's such a high demand on you in those positions. And unfortunately, you don't always feel the reward, meaning sometimes those families are not reunified, and that's a letdown for the worker as well. Obviously, the biggest letdown is for the family, the children, because you want them to be with their parents, but it can only be done if the parents are responsible and safe, and a safe environment can be provided for that child. When I worked as a conservatorship worker, my responsibilities are to basically work with the children who are in the care, custody, conservatorship of the state, meaning they have been removed from their parents or their guardian. And when that happens, you are making sure that you see the child, whether it's once a week, every other week, however often. You are responsible for making contact with that child to make sure that their placement is going well. Sometimes placements do fall apart, and you have to, move the child to a different foster home. So, you really don't want that to happen, but sometimes it just doesn't work out when a child is placed in a certain foster home for whatever reason. The placement could break down, and then you have to move the child into a different foster home. So hopefully the child can be placed with family members in what we call a kinship placement, with people they're already familiar with, comfortable with, who are protective of them, and parents should be asked at the time of removal, are there any family members or friends you want to, suggest that we can, place your children with. And sometimes they will give family members and friends, and sometimes they won't, because they don't want their family members and friends to know what's going on with, the family. It could, sometimes we place children in foster homes, and then 3 months into the placement, a family member comes forward and says, hey, I didn't know they were in foster care. They're familiar with me. I would like to take over their care. And so, and that happens, and sometimes we are able to go ahead and do background checks and all of that, and move the children into a different placement with family members. So when you're doing conservatorship work, you're making sure that the child and the placement is going well, which includes school. You are involved in meetings, like ARD meetings, if that's necessary, with the school. And you are doing whatever needs to be done with the child, making sure foster parents are keeping up all of their training, making sure that the child is getting to all of their visits with their parents, because you want to try to reunify any child who's been removed from their parents.
That is it for today's episode. Thank you so much for joining me today. If you have any questions based on the information provided in today's episode, please feel free to reach out. You can leave a voice message for me here on Anchor. If you know me personally, you can inbox me, or you can email me as well at onlyoneVLO2@gmail.com. And that email address is provided for you there on Anchor. I also ask that if you are able to contribute financially, that you do so. It helps me level up with my podcast to provide you with the best product available. So whatever is convenient for you, as far as the frequency, of course, is up to you. But again, if you enjoy listening to my podcast, or you are gaining information, please show your appreciation by contributing financially. Again, I hope all is well. You guys take care. Until next time, I will answer your questions based on today's content. I will answer any questions that you have and that you send me. I'll answer those on my next podcast. Thank you. Take care.